Welcome back to Geese Reads and Food for Thought. This month's genre is classics. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Welcome back to Geese Reads and Food for Thought, a virtual book club. This week's book is a Newberry Medal Honor book, which is Irene Hunt's Across 5 Aprils. This book begins in 1861, the year that the Civil War started. It's about a family who lives in southern Illinois named the Creightons, and especially about their youngest son named Jethro and the struggles they have to overcome during these 5 years of the Civil War. I hope you guys were able to read this book. It's an amazing classic. If you haven't, make sure you go read it for yourself first so you can enjoy the whole story of Across 5 Aprils. Then come back to this video so you can know some of my favorite parts and how it's related to the Food for Thought family. I have to say, I think this is a very well written book. I've read it so many times that I can almost at least recite some of the main events that happened during this book. And I think it has a great up and down of sadness, happiness, excitement, joy, despair. It takes you on a roller coaster of events and emotions in this book. Instead of trying to explain the book to you guys, I thought I should introduce some of my favorite parts of this book so you can actually hear what happens in the story. And make sure to tell me what your favorite parts are too on my Facebook and Instagram, since you can't comment on this channel itself. One of my favorite parts of the story is when Jethro, the youngest son of the family, has to go to Newton to be able to get supplies and food for his family. Along this 15-mile journey, there's rocks, marshes, woods, rickety old rotten bridges, and other obstacles that Jethro must face. To be able to do so on such a long journey and with a full team of horses, it was considered a man's job of that time, and Jethro was very happy to be able to do this journey. While in Newton, he buys and borrows different foods and supplies for his family, and then he gets invited over to dinner with Mr. Ross Melton, the editor of the local newspaper. Another event that shows how Jethro is growing up to be a mature, responsible person, which is also one of my favorite parts of the story, which is when he finds his older brother Eb, who had become a deserter during the war. It happened while Jethro was plowing a field. He noticed somebody lurking around the woods, which happened to be his brother Eb. After learning that Eb was a deserter, Jethro didn't want anything bad to happen to his brother, so he wrote a letter to the President, Abraham Lincoln, asking him to figure out a way to allow deserters back into the army. During this time, to do something as dramatic as writing to the president, especially at his young age, was very frowned upon. But Jethro had to do something to be able to help his older brother, and his letter had actually gotten to the President of the United States in Washington. Abraham Lincoln then took the time to write to Jethro, letting him know that all deserters were allowed back into the Union Army. Eb then later wrote back to his family, letting them know that he was back into the army and helping Abraham Lincoln fight for the cause of freeing all slaves in America. And now that brings up the food for thought. Across 5 Aprils heavily revolves around the struggles that Jethro Creighton has to overcome during the 5 years of the Civil War. And by doing so, it shows one thing about family, which is coming of age. At the beginning of the story, Jethro was just a young boy who did only what he was told and never thought of even thinking for himself. But as the years went on during the Civil War, he took great leaps and bounds in becoming a young man and growing up. And I'd say one of the biggest leaps he took was writing to the president. And it was such a big deal when he got a response from the president, and that really showed to everyone around him that he was indeed growing up. This is an excerpt on when he gets the letter and what happens during that time. It says, "The letter came one noon when they were all seated at dinner. As so often happened, it was Ed Turner who brought the mail out from town. Jenny ran to the door, eager for a letter from Shadrach. Nancy's eyes pleaded for a word from John. But Ed held only one large envelope that was addressed to Jethro in small cramped handwriting done in very black ink. It was postmarked Washington, D.C. "Looks like pretty important mail you again, Jethro," Ed said quietly. His eyes were full of puzzled concern. Jethro's head swam. This was a showdown. Now all the family, Ed Turner, and soon the neighborhood would know everything. In the few seconds that passed before he opened the envelope, he wished with all his heart that he had not meddled in the affairs of a country at war, that he had let Ed work out his own problems, that he, Jethro, who was still a sheltered young boy who did the tasks his father set for him, and shunned the idea that he did dare think for himself. He looked at the faces around him, and they spun in a strange mist of color. Black eyes and blue eyes, gray hair and gold and black, pink cheeks and pale ones, and weather-beaten brown ones. He read the letter through, word for word, and while he read, there wasn't a sound in the cabin beyond the slight rustle of the page in the shaking hand that held it. When he was through, he held the letter out to Jenny with a long sigh. "You can read it out loud, Jenny." Jenny stared at him as if he were a stranger, then she shook her head. "It's your letter, Jeff. You best do the reading." He didn't know whether he could or not. There was a great pounding in his ears, and his breath was short. But he ran his hand across his eyes and swallowed hard. After the first few words, his voice grew steady, and he read the letter through without faltering. It said, "Executive Mansion, March 14th, 1863. Master Jethro Creighton, Hidalgo, Illinois. Dear Jethro, Mr. Hay has called my attention to your letter, knowing as he does the place in my affection for boys your age, and the interest I have in letters coming from my home state of Illinois. The problem which you describe is one among many others that has troubled both my waking thoughts and those that intrude upon my sleep. The gravity of that problem has become of far-reaching significance, and is one in which the authority of military regulations, the decline of moral responsibility, and the question of ordinary human compassion are so involved as to present a situation in which a solution becomes agonizingly difficult. I had, however, made a decision relative to this problem only a few days before receiving your letter. There will be much criticism of that decision, but you'll understand when I say, if it be a wrong one, I have then erred on the side of mercy. All soldiers improperly absent from their posts, who will report at certain points designated by local recruit offices by April 1st, will be restored to their respective regiments without punishment except for forfeiture of pay and allowances for the period of their absence. This information you may relay to the young man in question, and I pray that the remorse and despair which he has known since the time of his desertion will bring his bare self to the cause for which many of his young compatriots have laid down their lives. May God bless you for your earnestness with which you have tried to seek out what is right. May he guide us both in that search during the days ahead of us. Yours, very sincerely and respectfully, Abraham Lincoln. Well, even though Jethro was still a young boy, like they said in the story, he was able to step out of his comfort zone and be able to help stand up for the people that he loved. And even though the food for thought of this week is coming of age, it also shows how much support he gets from his mother, his brothers, his sister, his dad, and a lot of other people surrounding him in his life. In the book, it shows how Jethro has a unique, different type of bond with each of his brothers. Tom and Eb, the youngest of the older brothers, they're the ones always to fuel Jethro with excitement, especially about the war in the beginning of the story. In the story, it was said that Bill was always Jethro's favorite of the older brothers, and he was always nice and kind, and always stood up for Jethro against Tom and Eb whenever they played tricks on him when he was younger. And Jethro neither disliked nor liked his oldest of the four older brothers, John. And that was mainly because John had already grown up and started his own family when Jethro was still young. Each of his four brothers influenced Jethro in a different way, and that helped Jethro become who he was and grow up. Do you have any older or maybe even younger siblings that help you do different things and influence the way that you are? Let me know on my Facebook and Instagram since, like I said, you can't comment on this channel itself. I have a younger brother who is just about to go into kindergarten, and he influences me a lot. He actually influenced me to be able to want to start this book club because I want him to love books and reading just the way that I did, and I want to influence even more people as well. The thing that I love about classic books is that not only do you get a good story out of it, but you also get to learn about historical events and different perspectives about in history that you won't be able to get in perhaps a textbook, especially in a book like this, Across 5 Aprils. Next week's book will take a whole different view on family, so make sure to tune in to see what that book is so you can enjoy a new classic book. Don't forget to subscribe and like and turn on the notifications so you don't miss a single video that I post. As always, keep on reading and I'll see you next time.